Zelensky a réclamé des sanctions internationales maximum et la fin de tout commerce avec la Russie.
Le président Abdel Fattah el-Sisi s'est entretenu avec le Premier ministre et le ministre de l'Électricité et a passé en revue les projets de production de l'hydrogène vert au niveau de la République. Lors de la réunion, le président a examiné le développement de la coopération avec les expertises internationales dans le domaine de la génération de l'hydrogène vert en utilisant l'énergie renouvelable et les sociétés internationales qui ont de l'expertise dans ce domaine. Le chef de la République a enjoint de renforcer les efforts dans le cadre de l'intérêt international au développement dans les projets d'hydrogène vert, considérés comme une bonne source d'énergie dans l'avenir proche et dans le cadre des efforts déployés par l'Égypte pour être un point de passage de l'énergie propre. Le président a enjoint de poursuivre les efforts pour attirer les investissements étrangers envers la région économique du canal de Suez dans le domaine de la production de l'énergie propre.
Le chef de la diplomatie, Sameh Choukri, également président en charge de la COP27, a passé en revue à Davos la vision de l'Égypte pour la conférence qui sera tenue en novembre prochain à Sharm el-Cheikh. Cela s'inscrit dans le cadre de sa participation à la séance intitulée « La voie à la COP27, les partenariats entre les secteurs publics et privés au niveau de l'action climatique au Moyen-Orient et en Afrique du Nord » tenue en marge du forum de Davos. Et voici le point.
Selon le porte-parole du ministère des Affaires étrangères, Ahmed Hafez, M. Choukri a prononcé un discours au cours de la session dans lequel il a passé en revue la vision de l'Égypte pour la 27e session de la COP qu'elle accueillera et présidera à Sharm el-Cheikh en novembre prochain, soulignant que cette vision est basée sur la nécessité de mettre l'accent sur une mise en œuvre efficace et rapide des engagements climatiques annoncés par divers pays d'une manière qui maintient l'objectif de réduire les températures mondiales de 1,5 degré Celsius. Sameh Choukri a aussi annoncé que cette vision comprend également l'importance de l'action climatique internationale fondée sur les dernières données concernant le phénomène du changement climatique, loin de toute politisation, ainsi que la nécessité de travailler avec toutes les parties et partenaires relatives à l'action climatique, y compris le secteur privé qui joue un rôle important à cet égard, ainsi que les gouvernements. Dans ce contexte, M. Choukri a indiqué que la COP27 verra le lancement d'un certain nombre d'initiatives en partenariat avec les différentes parties dans le but d'améliorer le respect des engagements climatiques dans le cadre de veiller à ce que cette session de la conférence donne l'occasion aux différentes parties de présenter leurs efforts et renforcer la coopération entre eux. Après 2 années de pause pour cause de pandémie, les élites politiques et économiques mondiales ont fait le retour à Davos. La dernière réunion en présentiel du Forum économique mondial dans la station de ski suisse remonte à janvier 2020. Si l'ombre de la guerre en Ukraine plane sur toute la réunion, le programme annonce aussi des débats sur d'autres sujets comme le changement climatique, la flambée des prix de l'énergie et les craintes de crise alimentaire mondiale.
En marge de sa participation au Forum économique mondial de Davos, le chef de la diplomatie Sameh Choukri s'est entretenu avec plusieurs hauts responsables de différents pays et parties participant au forum des préparatifs de la COP27 et des meilleurs moyens de promouvoir les mesures d'adaptation au changement climatique. Selon le porte-parole du ministère des Affaires étrangères, Ahmed Hafez, Choukri s'est réuni avec le président du Forum économique mondial, Boj Brind. L'entretien a porté sur les moyens de renforcer la coopération entre l'Égypte et le Forum dans le cadre de la présidence de l'Égypte et son accueil de la COP27. Choukri s'est également entretenu avec le vice-président de la Commission européenne, Margaritis Chinas. Les deux parties ont discuté des moyens de renforcer la coopération dans les domaines de l'énergie propre, la transformation numérique, la formation professionnelle, l'immigration et la culture. Choukri s'est aussi réuni avec son homologue koweïtien, Cheikh Ahmed Nasser Ahmed El Sabah, et le vice-premier ministre et ministre des Affaires étrangères du Qatar, Cheikh Mohammed bin Abdelrahman Al Thani.
D'autre part, le ministre du Pétrole et des Ressources minières, M. Tariq El-Molla, a mis l'accent sur l'importance de la participation de l'Égypte au Forum économique de Davos en vue de consolider les relations et la coordination conjointe entre les pays influents à l'économie mondiale. El-Molla a de même souligné l'importance de soutenir les politiques qui consolident les investissements dans
when it comes to creating the business model which would incentivize private investments in adaptation or mitigation projects with adaptation co-benefits. As COP27 President-designate, I'm keen on hearing your views on how to ensure that adaptation finance needs are adequately addressed and the necessary technologies are made available, bearing in mind that throughout our engagement with developing countries, including SIDS and LDCs, they have and continue to make it abundantly clear that issues of adaptation and resilience are their utmost priority. We trust that through public-private partnership and through creative approaches to the provisions and mobilization of climate finance, the cultivation of carbon markets and other mechanisms, we can send a clear message of reassurance to all those whose livelihoods have been impacted by climate change and that are not being left behind. Now, having said this, I think I can only echo what has previously been said by the panelists as it relates COP27 and what our objectives is. This is an African COP. Egypt is a developing country. So it's undoubtedly that we will make an effort to highlight and elevate the discussion as relates adaptation and to deal with the issue from a practical perspective and to find manner in which to bridge the gap between finance related to mitigation and that related to adaptation. I think there's no way forward except to deal with the reality that exists, and especially in the developing world, of the very deep consequences that climate change has produced, and that threatens not only the well-being of the planet, but threatens its security. It can lead to devastating consequences related to immigration, related to conflict and instability, which will have an effect everywhere. So it's not enough to deal with mitigation, but certainly adaptation has to be a high priority, and we have to demonstrate in COP27 that the international community is as committed to dealing with adaptation as it has been with mitigation, and that we can find the necessary practical mechanisms and also deal with it within the governmental and private sector collaborations to find ways to incentivize the private sector, which supposedly has trillions and trillions of dollars available for investment, but certainly that investment, whether it's being solely directed or primarily directed towards being channeled into developed countries, can be somehow diverted to where it's really hurting, which is the developing world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for that, and we look forward to seeing you in a few months in Sharm el-Sheikh. So it's now my pleasure. I'm going to ask the president of COP26, Alok Sharma, to make an intervention. You know, would you mind, sir, sharing your thoughts about adaptation? You know, we all came from Glasgow, sort of stunned at the mobilization that we saw that you and others managed to pull together in terms of resources, in terms of commitments. Do you see a particular pivot on adaptation right now? And so that would be my first question to you.
Well, great. Thank you very much for that. And I'm delighted to follow my friend, Minister Shukri, to talk about adaptation. And I mean, I have to say to you that adaptation was a big focus at COP26. In fact, for me personally, when I was Secretary of State for International Development, adaptation was a big focus. And since that time, I've always felt that actually adaptation has effectively been the poor cousin of mitigation. And that is something that we have tried to address. So if I just tell you some of the things that we did manage to get over the line at COP26, the first was a commitment from developed countries to double the amount of finance that goes to adaptation by 2025. And Minister Shukri and I co-chaired a meeting in Denmark a couple of days ago. We brought together almost 50 governments. And one of the things we agreed was that we would have an update on the finance delivery plan on the 100 billion, and for that to include adaptation as part of effectively the sort of progress report. So that's one of the first things we did. The second thing we did was in terms of work programs to start the work and agree on the Global Goal on Adaptation, the Glasgow to Sharm el-Sheikh work program. In terms of the issue of loss and damage, which I know is vitally important for very, very many countries, we did manage to get to a point where we've agreed to launch the Glasgow Dialogue, and that'll obviously be happening in June at the SB meetings. And then also in terms of getting technical support, it was very important for me that we ensured that we were in a position that we can operationalize the Santiago network, which is about providing technical support to countries on adaptation. And I think with goodwill on all sides, I hope by the time we get to COP27, we will be able to do that. So I think those were the pluses. But I have to say to you that you've seen this in the IPCC reports. But actually, you don't need reports. You see it around us, the impact of the changing climate and why we need to do more on adaptation. I mean, just in the last few weeks, we've seen record temperatures in India, in Pakistan. You've seen flooding in South Africa. I mean, all of this we have to deal with. But I think, as my friend Mr. Shukri said, it's not just about the public sector. This is where we also need the private sector to be involved. That's how we're going to get more progress on this. And if I can just tell you some of the progress that we're seeing from the private sector working with the public sector. We've got the Task Force on Climate-Related Disclosures. We've got the UN High-Level Champions Race to Resilience. We've got the Coalition for Climate Resilient Investment. We've got the Adaptation and Resilience Development Finance Collaboration, which is made up of 17 DFIs. We've got INSEE Resilience Global Partnership, which brings together over 100 governments, and very importantly, international institutions and the private sector as well, looking at protecting 500 million people rather, from the impacts of a changing climate. So there is progress, but I think we need to see a lot more, and I completely share Mr. Shukri's view that we need to see more progress on this. And yes, COP27 is going to be an African COP, and Africa is responsible for less than 3% of global emissions, but is going to have to make big efforts in terms of adaptation. So I think we owe it to the world to make sure that at COP27 we do put adaptation front and center, along with mitigation and finance. Thank you.
I have one quick little follow-up for you, sir. Looking back, because you do have the ability to look back at things. The Glasgow COP was on again, off again. We didn't know what was going to exactly happen because of the state of the world of COVID. Looking forward at Sharm el-Sheikh, we've got 6 months. Is there one piece of advice that you would like to offer humbly to the minister and to all of us? Like, is there one thing we should try and get done by the time we get there?
Well, just one personal observation. I'm a lot calmer looking back than I was looking forward. But Mr. Shukri and his team, I think, are doing a brilliant job. Look, it's not for me to sort of offer advice. We have a very close working relationship with our two teams on this, and every COP is different. What I think we should all want is to ensure that COP27 is more successful than COP26, and that COP28 then builds on what happens at COP27. Yeah. That's the way, friends, we're going to get climate action coming through.
Great. Thank you, sir. So just to keep the program moving, I'm now going to invite the panel to join us. I'm just going to call you up, and I think we can all come up. Senator Whitehouse from the United States, Minister Aditya Thackeray from the state of Maharashtra. Who do I have next? Sorry, I'm going to get my... Oh, Brett de Smet? Yep. From Chairman of AGEAS in Belgium. Emily Schuckberg, who is the Director of Cambridge Zero, University of Cambridge in the United Kingdom. And is that it? We don't have Sarah, right? That's it. Okay. My notes are a little bit old. Okay. I'm going to start with you, Senator. So this is interesting because you came up to me before, just before we started, and said, yep, I get this, but you cannot take your eye off the ball in terms of emission reduction. Do you really see it, sir, as a this or that? Don't we need to do both, and particularly when you think about it from the global south?
We absolutely have to support adaptation because it would be unjust not to. It is necessary. But we also have to remember that focusing entirely on adaptation is like telling somebody who has an illness, we're not going to cure your illness, but as it gets worse, we're going to give you a cane, and then we're going to give you a walker, and then we're going to give you a wheelchair. No, that's all great, and whatever effect the illness has, we have to be there for and show every possible support because we are responsible for what took place in the developed world. But my God, we've got to stop the emissions now. And if there's one thing that we can do to stop the emissions now, it would be to get corporate America, which is so well represented here at the World Economic Forum. You go up and down the promenade and you see all the wonderful office fronts and everybody's talking a lot of happy talk about climate here. Where I work, the enormous infrastructure built by corporate America to influence Congress is entirely against climate action. A third of them do nothing and are silent and don't care. A third of them are opposed because of concerns of their members, and a third of them are rabidly opposed because they're fronts for the fossil fuel industry. That's the world I live in. So coming here and seeing all this corporate talk about climate, it's like shifting to another world. Come visit my world. In my world, I don't have corporate friends trying to do a carbon price, trying to do a carbon border adjustment, trying to do the methane fee. It just, they ain't there. They have emissaries between them and me, and those emissaries are entirely against climate action. So I'm happy to be here, but boy, those emissaries need to be fixed. And so, if you could fix that and make corporations accountable for their carbon political footprint, that could be the small key that opens a very big door.
So I have one quick little follow-up for you. So, one thing that sort of struck me as the minister was speaking was that in America, we have this polarization. It's really difficult to talk about climate change. But people know what's happening to them. People know what's happening to their land, their homes, their skies, their waters. Is adaptation, talking about adaptation in the United States, does it give us sort of a backdoor to actually create more action?
Not really.
On the mission side? No.
No, because we've got a nativist element that gets very excited about any money going overseas. And just by the way, climate change didn't used to be partisan. John McCain ran for president on a terrific climate platform. When I got to the Senate, there were 3 different climate bills kicking around the Senate that were all bipartisan. Bipartisanship died in January of 2010 when the Supreme Court let unlimited corporate money go into politics and the fossil fuel industry stepped in and squashed bipartisanship. I saw the before. Now I'm living the after. If it can be done, it can be undone. And I think it's going to take pressure from groups like this to say, look, if you're a corporation and you want to show up here, bring your carbon political footprint with you. Bring your audit of your carbon political footprint, and then we'll know how serious and sincere you are.
Right, of course. Mrs. Thackeray, Aditya, you are the Minister of Climate, Environment, Tourism, state of Maharashtra, one of the most populous states. Mumbai is there, of course. You know what's going on in India right now, personally experienced some of that, including what's happening in Mumbai. Can you share us the view from the ground in India, and then help us understand the kind of investments that you might want to see, government-led investments, private sector-led investments, to really tackle adaptation for a country, with over 1 billion people, and most of whom are very climate vulnerable?
I think, to be honest, no one can give you.
Alors c'était une retransmission en direct de Davos où se tient le forum de Davos et où le ministre égyptien des Affaires étrangères, Sameh Shoukry, a prononcé un discours concernant la COP 27 qui se tiendra en Égypte à